Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar where we're going to have a look at sort of some top tips that you can follow to help manage the cost of living increases that we certainly heard so much about last year and unfortunately showing no signs of let up for this year either. Now, for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with before, my name's Katie Fye. I'm one of the directors of Better With Money. We're always delighted to work in partnership with the ICE Benevolent Fund and the support network for IMechE members to deliver these financial wellbeing webinars to you. And just before I kind of begin, I should just stress that Better With Money is an independent company and I'm providing information only, so there's no financial advice being given today. But if I mention any companies or websites along the way, it's just because we genuinely believe they offer good services which you can explore at your leisure, take advantage of if you wish, but certainly not because we're financially incentivized to do so. So with regards to today's session, then, we're going to have a look at what's been happening with the cost of living and how it's been affecting us. But then we're going to drop that into 5 sort of top tips that you can follow to help manage your finances to be more financially resilient. We'll sort of finish up with an action plan that you can take away, and then plenty of time for any questions that you may have as well. So just before we kind of launch into the top tips for improving our financial well-being, I wanted to just spend some time looking at something that may have already thrown us off course last year, and that's the cost of living increases that we've been seeing so much about in the news. Now, we've all seen and experienced that sort of energy bills, fuel, food, general living expenses all increased, with energy bills very much being at the forefront of the news. Now, last year, the energy price cap rose by a massive 54% in April. It then increased again in October to around another sort of 30%, which then brought the average household energy bill to around £2,500 per year. Now, not wishing to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm sure it hasn't escaped your attention that there is talk of a further increase to energy that's coming in April. And at the moment, it's kind of being speculated that it could be between 20 to a 30% increase that we're going to see again in the coming months. Now, the sharp rise is as a result of many things, but 2 main factors are that sort of world demand for energy has gone up. So we are experiencing those warmer summers and colder winters, but also that supply has declined because we're not trading with Russia and the implication that we have to that part of the world right now. Now, because of the rising prices, it's pushed up inflation, which we finished the year running around sort of 10%. And the way in which the Bank of England tries to combat that is by rising interest rates, simply to encourage really more people to save their money than spend. And that's why we've seen interest rates rise steadily throughout last year, finishing the year with a base rate of 3.5%. Now, when interest rates rise, it's obviously good news for savers because there's more interest available on money held in the bank, but it's bad news for borrowers because as those mortgage and loan rates go up, we have to pay more interest on our borrowing. And if you're not on a fixed rate mortgage, you will have already seen your payments increase, but also as fixed rates come to an end, and certainly many people scheduled to have that situation happen this year, those new rates are likely to be much higher than what was secured previously. Now, the good news is we are actually seeing those rates come down a little bit now from what we did see sort of more around November, December time. So slightly positive outlook there that the market is stabilising and we are seeing some reduction to some of those fixed rate and trackers. So as you can see, kind of day-to-day living expenses, they are costing us more. So there's a big question around how people are already sort of dealing with it. If we have a look at the Ipsos survey, it shows that most people are going to sort of continue to cut costs in areas such as socialising, holidays, delaying those kind of big purchase decisions. Fewer employees are actually looking to change job or ask for pay rises in the current climate. And that's because there is an acceptance that employers are unable to give pay increases, certainly that match the 10% inflation, without running into financial difficulty themselves. So if you haven't done it already, it really is time to sort of hit the reset, have a look at costs, and that's what I'm going to help with now by looking at sort of 5 small and actionable tips that we can all follow to kind of help weather this financial storm that we find ourselves in. So tip number one is to know your budget. So it's about seeing what you're spending and where you can make those quick, effective changes. So as a reminder, your budget quite simply is what income you've got coming out and what you need to pay out each month. And the aim is obviously to cover your bills, but also have a little spare at the end of each month to save towards your money goals. Now, there's lots of free tools available to help you to budget online. We've got the Better with Money budget planner that sits on our website, which you're very welcome to use. And we like to think about 3 different types of spending. So the first being essential spend. So that includes your rent, mortgage, bills, food shop, all the costs that you have that are essential for you to live by day to day. Then you've got debt. So that's those loan repayments, car finance, overdrafts, etc. And then thirdly, the fun stuff. So it's really important to capture on average how much you're spending in the month on things like takeaways, going out with friends, sort of drinks after work, etc. So my suggestion is that you actually sort of print off your most recent bank statement, take a highlighter pen, highlight each and every entry on there, and then record the outgoing in the specific category on the budget planner. And the reason I say to do that line by line is because it will actually show you a true picture of what's being spent, and it doesn't allow you to overlook payments such as kind of all of that Amazon expenditure or maybe the trip to the shop for milk, but then £30 later you end up coming back home. You may want to sort of go over a couple of months to get a really accurate picture. But once you've sort of filled out what you spend versus what you've got coming in, you should be able to see whether you've got any spare each month, which you can then save towards emergencies or those sort of money goals that you've set for yourself, or whether you're actually in a situation where you have a shortfall. And if you do have a shortfall, it's about trying to be honest with yourself about where it's coming from. So could you maybe cut back on that one takeaway a month? Even that could save you £300 a year. Maybe you're buying coffee too from work every day. If you made it at home or in the office or on site, you could actually save £650 for the year. So they're really small changes, but they can make a big difference financially overall. And whilst you're doing your budget, it's worth digging deeper into those things that happen once a year or that occasional spend by filling out an annual planner. Now, typically we know about these things in advance, but we often fail to account for them until the moment is upon us. So things like Christmas, big birthdays, wedding anniversaries, hen do's, stag do's. So again, really good practice, work out the annual cost and then divide it by the number of months you have left to see what you need to be saving for those events throughout the year. Now, tip number 2 is to reduce the toxic spend. So that's the money that possibly is being wasted on things you probably don't need. So when doing your monthly budget, take a look at those non-essential direct debits and standing orders you've got coming out of the bank account. Are you double paying for anything? So maybe you're paying for mobile phone insurance, but actually you're also getting it through your package bank account that you pay a fee for. Or are you a household, a little bit like mine, that maybe tries to take out every type of streaming service possible? So Sky Movies, Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, you name it, all tries to be taken out. But the reality is, for my household, it's only really Netflix that's being used. I can always find at least one thing to cancel when I go through these exercises. So I am really, really confident you will too. But it's then about sort of taking a look at your essential bills and seeing if you can review them to get a better deal. So there's lots of fantastic comparison websites you can use for this purpose. Before you switch, always phone existing providers, see if they can sort of change your tariff to a cheaper one or price match what you've been able to find elsewhere. You know, research has shown us that reviewing your insurances 3 weeks before the renewal date is actually when you'll be offered the best prices, because insurers know you've got time to shop around. Now, in terms of sort of reducing your energy bill, you know, whilst costs are high, there's a few things you can do in terms of reviewing your energy behaviours. And I know, you know, we've supported with webinars already kind of in this space, but, you know, just small things like hanging up clothes rather than using tumble dryers, using microwaves rather than the oven, turning down your thermostat, you know, by 1 degree, because for every 1 degree you can go down, you can save 3% on your energy bill. looking into things like energy efficient light bulbs, switching off appliances overall every night. Even these sorts of things can have significant savings on a yearly basis. And I would really encourage you that if this is an area that you want to have a deeper understanding on, if you just revisit the webinar that's already been run, it will sit sort of in the ICE Benevolent Fund archives, and the same for the support network as well. Those recordings are all there for you to go back and look at, and it's a brilliant opportunity for you to just deepen your understanding in some of these specific cost saving areas. Another being food. So according to the Office of National Statistics, we spend nearly a fifth of our income on food and non-alcoholic drinks. So sort of getting into the habit of doing weekly meal plans, it avoids excess ingredients being brought, it reduces wastage, but also it stops the temptation of the aisles and the promotions. And according to the Money Advice Service, you can save 20% on your food shop just by sticking to your plan. So we have got meal planners available on our website, which you're very welcome to use. If you haven't discovered them already, have a look at some of the food apps that are out there. So Olio, Too Good To Go. Also be mindful of any discounts and benefits that maybe you get through your place of work for those of you that are employed. Obviously, for anybody self-employed, doesn't kind of help because unfortunately you haven't got an employer that you can tap into and benefit from. But certainly for those of you that are employed, take the time to sort of understand as well what opportunities you have sort of through your place of work. And again, please do revisit, the huge amount of sort of webinars that are put in place as well to support your well-being in lots of different areas, because some of this will have already been covered and covered in some depth as well. Now, tip number 3 is to try and find ways to reduce the debt that you have. And there's a few ways in which you could do that. So at the moment, paying off high interest debt first before you save, purely because although those saving interest rates have come up, most banks are still at best maybe only paying around 3%. So it's almost guaranteed that some of the interest you're paying on your debt is going to be a lot more than what you can earn on that same amount of money in savings. So if we have a look at the example that we have here on the slide, if you have £3,000 on a credit card at, let's say, 20% interest, you'd be charged £600 a year. And that is assuming a constant balance. Now, if you had £3,000 in savings at 3%, you'd only earn £90 a year. So you would actually be £510 a year better off by repaying the card and using the savings and saving yourself that £600 of APR. Now, if you're not able to pay off all your debts with savings, then it's time to take control of your debt. Firstly, you can sort of make that visual record of what debt you have. So writing it down either on a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, whatever works best for you. Writing the amount that you owe, the interest rate that's due, and then the date each month that you need to make that payment. So by writing them all down, you can see which has got the highest interest rates, and they're the ones that you should aim to pay off first. Always pay the minimum across all debts by the dates due. But if you've got any surplus, and that's the idea of that budgeting exercise, to really map that spend, to really go through it with a fine-tooth comb and to challenge with the intention to free up that spare money, that can then go to something more meaningful. So in this example, it's that surplus that can be used to really tackle that most expensive debt. And only when the most expensive debt is repaid do you then shift the focus to the next highest interest rate card or loan, and so on. Always check terms and conditions of the finance agreement that you're going to overpay, just to ensure that you won't be charged a penalty or anything like that for overpaying, if that's what you do decide to do. Now, if your credit rating is good enough, you may be able to bring all of your debt together under one credit card or loan so that you reduce the rate of interest that you're paying. And there's 2 main ways of doing that. So the first is a 0% credit card deal, where you apply for that 0% card and you sort of roll the balances onto that. And the idea here is you get it cleared whilst you're still in the 0% period, so that you avoid any high charges coming down the line. The other alternative is a low interest rate loan. So you apply for that low interest rate loan and you use that money to wipe off all of your more expensive debt, to pay it off. And then you commit to repaying the loan over that 12, 24, 36 months, whatever the arrangement is. Now, if you're going to try and get a new credit card or a loan in order to sort of consolidate your debt, bring it together with the intention to reduce the payments, then it's worth using an eligibility checker first, just to see what cards you're likely to be accepted for based on your circumstances. Purely because if you apply for a credit card and you're turned down, then it will actually be noted on your credit file and it can result in your credit score going down, meaning you'd be less likely to be accepted for finance in the future. And there's also a really useful tool that sits on the Money Helper website as well. It's the Money Navigator tool. You fill in your details and it kind of lets you know the money issues you need to tackle first, how to sort of stay on top of bills and payments, but also what extra help and support you may be entitled to as well. Which then sort of leads me on to help and support in more detail. So if you feel that you can't manage your debt, please do ask for help. Debt doesn't just happen to people in lower paid jobs or with gambling or drug addictions. It can affect everybody, young or old. One of the first places you can obviously always turn to is the fantastic services that are offered by the ICE Benevolent Fund and the Support Network who have sponsored the webinar today. They provide financial, kind of workplace and wellbeing support to you and your families. So as a reminder, I've put their sort of helpline websites, telephone numbers on here so that you can find out more if you need to as well. And also, it's really important when sort of thinking about managing the cost of living, looking to build your financial resilience, it's also about making sure that you maximise income and seek, that support that's available to you. So tip number 4 very much is to maximise your income by understanding your state basic entitlements and seeking that support where you can. So the first thing you could do is check any government support that's available to you. So that's been made a lot easier because the government have just launched a website which details all the support that they're providing people with the cost of living increases. So I've put their web address here. It's also important to know that you may be wondering whether there's any other state benefits that you or your family and loved ones are entitled to that you're not receiving already. And the quickest and easiest way to see what you may be eligible for is to go onto the Entitled To website, where you can sort of fill in their questionnaire about your personal circumstances. It will then tell you whether you might be entitled to any state benefits before you then go through the application process on the gov.uk website. Now, if you need any help applying for benefits, you can always speak to Citizens Advice, and I've included their website at the bottom of the slide as well. It's worth seeing if you're eligible for any grants. So there's lots of organisations that have set up charitable funds that can give grants if you're in financial difficulty. It's money that could help make your situation easier to manage and you don't need to pay it back. So the Turn to Us website is a really good place as well for looking at those wider grants that could be out there. But also you've got the Rent a Room scheme as well, which allows you to earn up to £7,500 per year tax-free from letting out furnished accommodation in your home. So if you've got children that have gone off to university now, they've moved out, you've got those spare rooms and you're finding it a little bit of a struggle financially at the moment, then lots of people are looking to the Rent a Room scheme as a way of getting that additional £7,500 in to the home tax-free. So a few ideas there just to help ensure that you're getting as much money coming in as you are entitled to as well. And lastly, but by no means least, is tip number 5, and it's to retrain the brain to adopt good money habits, which can save you money in the long run. Now, a habit should take you less than 30 seconds. It should require very little effort, something that you can do every day. It's one of my absolute favourites. It's at the top, and it's the 30-day wait. What we have to remember is the likes of Amazon, PayPal, iTunes, they're not our friend. Being able to sort of buy stuff with a touch of a button or a scan of our face really can indulge our desire to impulse buy, which ultimately deviates us from that budget, stops us achieving the goals that we've set for ourselves. So the idea here is if you see something you want to buy, and it isn't essential, of course, you make yourself wait 30 days. If you still want to buy it, then it most likely means it's a rational purchase and you can allow yourself the spend. But the desire for most impulse purchases will have faded long before the 30 days is up. You'll feel great that you didn't give in to temptation, but also you can, you've still got that money and you can still use it for something far more meaningful as well. So when you're next sort of browsing the internet, you're in the shop, you feel tempted to buy something, just try and remember that 30-day rule. Just give it a go and see how you get on, because you might find if it works really well for you, you might bring it in more and more to all of your kind of impulsive behaviors that maybe you're somebody that struggles with that. But it's really important to establish those positive habits. They really do serve us well beyond we've even achieved our specific goal. They help improve our mindset and our relationship with money and the way in which we feel about money, which is quite key. So this slide is just a summary of the top kind of 5 tips that we've been through that you can just easily bring in to help manage your money, just to ensure you're giving yourself the best possible chance of managing the rising cost of living. There's obviously lots of other top tips as well, but for the purpose of today's bite-sized session, we condense that down really to the key 5. For some people, you may be doing this already, and if so, it's about ticking a box and moving on. For others, tip number 1 to tip number 5 maybe will form an action plan for the rest of the year ahead. And that's okay. That's great. That's fine. Because what we want to do with all of these sorts of things, when we're taking ourselves through any type of financial analysis or exercise or improving our money mindset, we just want to make sure that, come this time last year, we say, do you know what? I'm in a much better place than actually where I was the year before. So even if it's just very small, changes, habitual changes that you're making, that's great, because you will get to the end of the year and you will be in a stronger position. And that's the idea. It's all about breaking it down into those small, manageable chunks. If we try and change our whole financial situation, we'll become very despondent, very demotivated, and we'll just switch off from personal finance. If we break it down into small, bite-sized, manageable chunks, it's very motivational. It helps us to achieve those bite-sized goals and gives us the desire to then strive for the bigger challenges as well. So it's within all of our power to be able to change our financial story. We just have to be switched on to our money mindset and really work at it and really bring in those tips. Unfortunately, the cost of living isn't going away. I wish I had, different news for you, but sadly it isn't. We are going to see this year get a little bit more tricky as well, perhaps before we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So it is really important we work on our financial resilience, that we review that budget and we cut down on that unnecessary spend as much as possible, so that we are freeing up more and more money to go towards the increased cost of living that we still have to come possibly. And before I kind of finish by handing over the questions that you have, I just want to reiterate, the fantastic services that you do have, already in place through the IC Benevolent Fund and the support network, where, they really can provide that financial, workplace, well-being support to you and your families. So please don't suffer in silence. Do reach out and see what help and support is available to you as well. And I will now hand back over to Sarah for us to run through any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Lots of really useful tips and lots to think about there. So first of all, a friend has suggested completing surveys for cash. Is this a scam?
So good question. We've got lots of people at the moment that are trying to find a whole raft of ways in which they can increase their income, one of which is sort of completing surveys for either products or cash. One thing I would just sort of err on the side of caution is just being comfortable with where you are submitting your marketing information, because ultimately that is what you are doing. And we know that kind of online identity theft and fraud is very, very prevalent at the moment. They are getting more and more sophisticated in how they are making contact with you and what information they already know about you as well. So like with any website you sign up for, any sort of survey for cash, there is going to be a trade-off for information, and it's making sure you're very comfortable with what information you are giving them. And also, obviously, that should be limited. So when you start entering into what could be perceived as sensitive information, I would then start to stray away from that, because ultimately you could be putting that in the wrong hands that's then going to use it to a different advantage through adopting your identity or phoning you with a level of intellectual capital about you already that's going to steer what their agenda is. So yeah, just take care on that one. And same with anything where you're inputting personal information, be very, very mindful.
Thank you very much. And next question, is taking out a loan or taking out a credit card a better option for emergency expenditure?
Yeah, really what we want you to get to a place of is that you're actually building your financial resilience through building that emergency fund. And an emergency fund, as a general rule of thumb, should be 3 months of your essential spend. So the best option for emergency expenditure is actually getting yourself in a position where you've been able to work that monthly budget really hard, free up that surplus income at the end, and then start to save it in an instantly accessible environment where no risk is being taken to protect you against those sorts of unforeseen. So it wouldn't be recommended to use loans or credit cards for emergency expenditures. It is better to have already built that emergency fund, that buffer to protect you against that. But that said, sometimes, you know, reality takes hold, and if it is something where you haven't yet got yourself to a place where you have that 3 months of emergency money to one side and you do need to use the credit card, then it's, you know, there's a few things we can do there. It's firstly making sure you've got a 0% credit card anyway, so therefore at least you're not attracting any interest rates unnecessarily. But also it's making sure if you are putting a level of spend on the credit card that you are also committing to paying it back as soon as you can. And not getting in that habit of sort of leaving it on the credit card to fester, then that balance rolls into another month. And then before you know it, it could be having impact against future loan, but also it could be having an impact against your credit score as well. So best option for emergency funds, try and build that emergency deposit account so that you've got that buffer sitting there ready to go for when these sorts of things happen.
That's great. And just one more question. Should I be getting a mortgage at the moment or should I keep waiting?
I think, unfortunately, nobody's got their crystal ball to be able to predict what's going to happen. At the end of the day, if your affordability is already there, you've got your deposit. Obviously, the bigger the deposit, the better anyway. So if you're already in that position, now is as good a time as any, because we simply can't predict what's going to happen. And like I said, actually interest rates are coming down a little from even what they were. Not the base rate isn't, but in terms of the mortgage offers, those interest rates are actually coming down from what we saw them at towards the end of last year. So as a very rough example, we saw some fixed rates being offered out around 6-7%. Those same deals are now more in the 4%. So we are actually seeing some really positive movements. Will it go any lower? Who knows? But potentially lots of concern it could go higher. So arguably it could be a good time to lock in if it suits your affordability now.